Welcome to the Storylux Marketing Podcast. In this season, we explore how marketers use AI to get better results for less money. Over the next weeks, we interview marketers who show us an AI-based marketing process they actually use. In previous episodes, we learned how to craft a buyer persona, develop a marketing plan, or how to make sure Google doesn't flag your text as AI written. Today, we're going to break the mold. Instead of walking through the process step by step, we will take a more philosophical approach. With my guest today, I will talk about the creative process and how to use AI as a trampoline for creativity. In my chat with her, 3 things stood out to me. The learning curve to truly master AI in writing is a long one. Yes, AI can save you a ton of time, but it also takes a ton of time to actually get good results. Using Spark Toro, secondly, is a great way to have very precise target market descriptions that improve your output. And thirdly, avoiding being trapped in an echo chamber, because it's tempting to go with the flow and fall prey to popular opinions that are common on ChatGPT. How to avoid that. So listen to our guest today, Adriana Tica, who is an experienced marketing professional and a recognized expert in the field of content creation and copywriting. Her work primarily involves creating strategies that convert their target audiences. Adriana is known for a contrarian approach to marketing, and she places a strong emphasis on presenting unique perspectives and challenging common beliefs. Besides her work at Copywriting, her company, Adriana also runs a newsletter called Ideas to Power Your Future, where she shares unbiased and well-researched ideas around marketing. Caveat, I'm a subscriber myself. It's really good. And now, let's learn from Adriana. Welcome back to the Storylux podcast with a very special guest today, and I'm very excited about what she's going to share today. We have Adriana Tica, and Adriana runs a marketing agency called Iden, doing copywriting, and she runs her own newsletter. And today we're going to talk about some of the processes that she uses for both. Welcome, Adriana.
Hey, Simon. Thank you. It's great to be here.
And pleasure is mine. Cool. So in the preparation for the call, we chatted a little about what you do. And I think one of the things that I really like about how you use ChatGPT is that you have a contrarian approach in the sense that you try to find holes in your thinking, in the arguments, in your ideas to open up a broader perspective. And I think it's something I'm very interested in. Or in the previous episodes, what I've come to understand is ChatGPT is a great tool to get a bigger picture of what is out there, because our own perception of the world is very limited to what we see. So let's talk about how you use ChatGPT to find objections. You called it a sparring partner. Let's talk through a process where you describe what the sparring looks like.
Sure. So I use this process for my newsletter. My newsletter is called Ideas to Power Your Future. And what I try to do in every issue is make sure that people understand there's more than one way to do things. And even if I recommend a marketing strategy, because that's the core of my newsletter, I recommend marketing and growth strategies. It doesn't mean that it's the only way. I don't write gospels there. I write suggestions and stuff that makes you think. So one way I like to use ChatGPT is to feed it a prompt based on my idea for a newsletter issue, and ask him to take the contrarian view. For instance, for a recent issue, I wrote about audience mirroring and using your audience words in your own content and your own copy. And that's a great way to approach copywriting and content writing, because it helps people relate to what you do better. It helps make them feel like they're part of your own tribe, like you're so similar that you have to do business together, you know? And this is a great way to do copywriting. It's a great way to do content. It's an even better way to do ads. But on the other hand, it comes with its own set of problems, you know? So instead of being an echo chamber and trying to use audience mirroring in everything you do, you should also understand that it can come with ethical problems. For instance, if your audience is very big on gender stereotyping or has racial biases, you should not be using their words. You should instead try to be a mold, not a mirror for them. Or audience mirroring can lead to groupthink. It can also make you look a bit unoriginal and with nothing interesting to say, because you should be aware of the fact that you aren't the only one mirroring the same audience, you know? And so I simply write a very basic prompt in ChatGPT. I tell him, act as a marketing expert who does not like to use audience mirroring. Tell me a few reasons why audience mirroring is a bad idea. And while I knew some of these use cases before I wrote my newsletter, ChatGPT came up with a few new suggestions. For instance, I never thought about groupthink. I thought about the ethical problems. I thought about becoming yet another echo chamber. I thought about making it, how it makes it hard for you to establish your own authority. But I never thought about the groupthink part. And ChatGPT helped here. And what I do is I take what ChatGPT spews back at me, and I make these points in my newsletter, like, okay, you can use audience mirroring, but also beware of these things. Beware of how you use it. Because once again, I would like to contribute to building a world with fewer echo chambers, you know? So
That's a very noble goal.
Yeah, I like to help my subscribers find a middle ground. That's always the healthy approach, you know?
Yeah, I like it also, because I think since ChatGPT is, in my understanding, I'm not a tech person, but basically just sort of a mirror of everything that's out there. So the danger of this becoming an even bigger echo chamber is very big, because if we only rely on like the thing that is out there instead of having that challenge, we just end up with more of the same stuff. And it's going to be interesting to see how this pans out a couple of months, years down the road. The more content that came out of ChatGPT being fed back to the system, and the system sort of seeing more of that content that it's originally generated. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially since most people use ChatGPT to find new ways to support their own ideas, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's always uncomfortable to be challenged with your own ideas, because you want confirmation of like, yes, I'm right, and maybe tweak it a little, but I want support for my argument.
Absolutely. That's why I call it an intellectual sparring partner. I think we could all use a bit more critical thinking in our lives, and especially in our businesses, you know? Like, don't implement any advice you find online just because a popular influencer told you to. They may have been using ChatGPT to generate that advice, you know, and it's been already used 1,000 times, so it's no longer effective.
Yeah, I mean, without going on a tangent here, but it's something that I also feel. You see a lot on LinkedIn influencers that have a recipe, and they're sort of the one sample of one to prove that this recipe works, and you gotta try it. And very often it's like, yeah, maybe it works for you, but maybe it does. Maybe it was just a correlation in your case, and not really a causation that caused you to be successful with whatever you do. So yeah,
absolutely. It's why I recently wrote about how I posts are a bit harmful, you know, because it's exactly like you said, it's a sample of one, and it fails to account for context. Whereas when you write a how-to post, you're forced to look at the bigger picture and figure out if what you're saying is going to help your audience, if it's going to be applicable to them too. Because, you know, you can publish your own LinkedIn recipe and start it off with steal my framework for insane growth. But if you're starting off at 100,000 subscribers, of course it worked for you. But for someone starting with 100 followers or contacts, it's definitely not the same growth analyst.
Absolutely. And I could add a lot here. I'm not going to do this because It's all about you.
Maybe off,
But, yeah, exactly.
maybe off camera.
Yeah. Well, maybe the one thing that I can say that there are some influencers I can think of that are successful. I respect them, and they give a recipe that they are currently using. But as you said, it's not what they did at the beginning. And I went back in their timeline to the early posts, and they were not really sort of the methodology that they're now selling, which I thought it's interesting because there was a development, and they only talk about this one point in time, but it's a tangent. So that is your newsletter. Now let's switch gears and talk about your business. You have an agency, you do copywriting with this agency, you have a team, and similar to the theme with the sparring partner for the newsletter, you also have a use for ChatGPT that I found very interesting in the agency. So let's start by first telling us a little about your agency. What do you do, and sort of what is the context of your service that you provide to clients?
Right. So we provide copywriting and content writing services, also marketing strategy services. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to be referring mostly to copy and content writing. We mostly work with the small businesses, a lot of them in the tech space, but not exclusively. So especially when we do copywriting for them, we create sales pages or landing pages, or even copy for PPC ads. One thing we like to get out of the way is the objections potential readers may have. Like when you read a landing page, at some point you have questions. Yeah, but hey, how long is this going to take? Or is this right for me? Is this environmentally friendly? Even if you sell cars, for instance, you sell new cars, there are people who are going to object and tell you it's much better to buy a second-hand car. And then there are people who are going to tell you you should buy a bike. It's more eco-friendly. You don't need to add to the pollution and whatnot. Now, of course, when you've spent too much time in your own business, you don't always realize these objections firsthand. And you could go the longer route and mine for reviews and do customer interviews to find out what their initial objections were and how they overcame them. But the faster route is to go via ChatGPT and simply ask them, why shouldn't I buy a car? What are 5 reasons why I shouldn't buy a car? Because what ChatGPT does is just like you said before, it mirrors everything that's already online. So while you can't rely on it for, let's say, more sophisticated thinking, you can rely on it for summarizing and capturing prevalent ideas online. So you're looking for these very, very common ideas and very common objections to your product or your service. And then you can simply add them to an FAQ section on your landing page. You can use them when you have a sales call with your prospect. You can simply make sure that you address the objections before the client even had time to formulate them.
That's cool. That's very cool.
We've used this successfully for a lot of SaaS companies, for clients who are in custom software development. Because, for instance, custom software development, it's a lengthy process. It costs way more than SaaS in the long run. So there are a lot of objections there. A lot of objections you can piggyback on and create content as well as copy. So I found it very useful to use ChatGPT, like I said before, to add an FAQ section to a sales page, or to add a block that downright says you shouldn't buy this if. So you shouldn't buy custom. Really, it helps pre-qualify your leads. It helps make sure that more of your clients are happy, because whatever you do, not all your clients are going to be happy. But if you tell them downright, this is not for you if you want to use your software tomorrow. This is not for you if you're not prepared to invest 2 or 3 years until you have the finite product. This is not for you if you don't have this budget up front. It saves you a lot of time in calls with bad fit clients.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing show of honesty, you know? You're not trying to sell to anyone. You know your product isn't for anyone, and you're not afraid to admit it.
I like
So,
it.
and these are great use cases both for copy and for content, because you can create a lot of blog posts around themes like this. This is not right for you. If you have it on your sales page, you can also have a blog post, a social media post about it. And ChatGPT is great at coming with objections. In a way, if you look at it, I I use it's pretty much the same use case, but in one scenario for my newsletter, I use it to offer a broader view. But when it comes to sales, um, it helps to narrow the focus on your own product.
So when you do that, do you do this in the context of a sales stage or a persona profile that you also ask, hey, if you are, I don't know, this kind of person, what objections would you have?
Absolutely. For instance, for one of our customers who does custom software developing, they have a lot of buyer personas. Like they did a lot of work for medical clinics, but they also do work for gyms and for various other industries. And it helps a lot if you ask ChatGPT to act as a manager of a medical clinic in this state in the US, and tell me, why wouldn't you buy custom-made software, or why would you choose SaaS software over custom-made software?
I mean, that's a cool way also to test new product ideas, or before you start a business or launch a new product, to understand what you might have missed in the market, why that is not such a great idea, or what you need to do differently in order to be successful. Because I never thought about being so specific with as you said, asking you're the manager in a specific state, in this role, what would your objections be? So that's cool. I like it.
Yeah, and it helps a lot because you see, we're a remote team. We work with clients all over the world, and sometimes it can be very hard to pinpoint local issues, or to nail down the local mentality, you know, because certain states in the US, depending on their geography, have other problems. They have completely different legislation that they work around, especially in sensitive industries like the medical one or the financial one. So it helps to ask ChatGPT to act as an expert in that specific area.
That's so interesting, because we had another guest on the podcast who builds buyer personas and can do this now in half the time and barely any cost, by saying, okay, this act as this person, this kind of client buying that, and they can write buyer persona profiles just by the output. They have a sort of a set of questions, but they can do it very specifically, as you say, for states or for roles or industries. And instead of having to speak with these people going out, they can do it instantaneously and from anywhere in the world. So that is a fascinating use case.
Absolutely. One other thing I like to do, it's another AI-powered tool. I don't know if you know it. It's Spark Toro.
That's who is the guy who started that? The Moz guy.
Rand Fishkin.
Rand Fishkin.
Yeah, the Moz guy. Rand Fishkin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Moz guy.
And in the Moz guy, I think he's going to forever be the Moz guy. I like to start this process occasionally on Spark Toro, you know, because Spark Toro, it's like it did just 1 ounce of information about your target audience, like what do they talk about, or what are the media do they read. They're going to give you this full profile. Like, for instance, if you say my audience talks about the creator economy, and Spark Toro is going to tell you who they follow on social media, what press do they read, what podcasts do they listen to, what hashtags do they use, what are the most common words in their bios, and so on. So you can take all that information, that positive information, if you will. You have a few traits of your buyer personas, and then you can go into ChatGPT and say, okay, so you're this guy who reads the New York Times, you listen to the Storylux podcast, and you also follow Simon on LinkedIn. So tell me a bit about why you wouldn't buy my car. Because you have all this content for the buyer persona. The more you feed into ChatGPT, the better its response is going to be, the more detailed, and of course, the more useful. I think, yeah, and it's all AI powered. To me, this is what the future is going to look like. You're going to have to use at least 2 AI powered tools to get usable or better insights, if you will.
Yeah, I never thought about using SparkToro. On the other podcast, we had a guest who uses ChatGPT and Bing and does the same search on both platforms and then compares what the results are and gets, again, a bigger picture by using these 2 AI platforms. So interesting. And with the SparkToro, so you would start by getting information on the target group that you want to speak to on SparkToro and then take that as a prompt and feed it to ChatGPT to be very precise with the output that you can get.
Absolutely. But again, I must advise caution because you're going to need to double check everything, AI hallucinates and all that.
That is my next question. Have you found that does what you get, does it align with reality? Or how closely does it align with the reality, or how much of sort of a manual check and refinement is needed?
Well, it depends. If you feed it a sort of basic prompt and you ask it to generate arguments pro or against a certain idea that you have, the biggest issue with it is that it's going to give you a lot of generic stuff. It's mostly unusable, especially if what you're trying to do is come up with a newish perspective. For me and for my newsletter, most of what it spews is unusable. It's just a starting point for my own ideation process. If you try to go in deeper and look for actual information and look for ideas, then you're either going to have to refine your prompt or make sure you double check everything, especially when it comes to legal advice, to financial advice, or to health-related advice. I don't know if you recall, but at some point, Google, in their search guidelines, they had this entire section on pages that they called Your Money or Your Life. If you had a website that offered financial or health-related information, then the guidelines for ranking that website were going to always be stricter because you're offering potentially dangerous guidance. And still, even with those guidelines in place, there were a lot of websites out there that offered really, really bad information and hoax proliferation on legal, financial, or health-related topics. And then if you look at it, what ChatGPT does is draw from those websites because they rank well and they're the primary sources of information. And it's going to spew back wrong information. So don't make medical decisions with ChatGPT. Don't let ChatGPT invest your money. Don't take legal advice from it. Unless you double check. Of course, it doesn't always hallucinate, but these are very important areas. I mean, you get a slogan or a CTA wrong, that's entirely fixable. Much as I love my craft, marketing, I know it's not a life or death type of job,
Yeah.
If I get something wrong, nobody's gonna die. But in those other fields, it's a bit trickier.
As marketers, we don't kill people, we just break some people's self-confidence, but that's a different thing.
Absolutely.
So when you do, can you give some an idea of like the old and the new in terms of now that you have ChatGPT to find objections? I suppose you've done this before, or you had to do a lot of more research, ask people to get that information, and maybe it was still a less complete picture. If you compare sort of the time effort that you had in this old world without ChatGPT and in the new world, How does that compare? How much time do you save, or is it purely a quality improvement?
No, it also saves a lot of time. I'd say you get this done in about a third of the time, because what you could do before ChatGPT was Google the same thing, give me some arguments against buying a used car, but then you'd have to go to several websites and skim their content, and you would find all of those articles, 10 reasons not to buy a secondhand car, 15 reasons, 30 reasons. But between those websites, a lot of those reasons would be the same. So you'd spend a lot of time vetting the information, skimming the text only to find repetitive information. ChatGPT eliminates that. It also comes with a lot more boilerplate content, but I would say you get things done in perhaps one third of the time. If it's not a sensitive industry, again, if it's a sensitive industry, you're going to have to do a manual double check. So, yeah.
But it's still faster. Like this lawyer in New York who was quoting some court cases that didn't exist, and he was sort of embarrassed in court. I guess you read the story as well, and she had to admit that she didn't write the argument.
Yeah, I did. I mean, the judge had a field day. Yeah. I was expecting it to happen,
And you expect it at the same time. You're like, how can people be so stupid? But I mean, there's always somebody who did read the fine print of the dangers and the shortcomings of this technology.
Absolutely. You see, this is why I try to offer a well-rounded perspective. Like, AI is great for you. It can save you a lot of time. It can also get you into a lot of trouble, So perhaps what the lawyer guy did is that he forgot to read the second part of the argument, or he never stumbled upon a comprehensive article that said, AI has its limitations. Don't buy into everything it says. Echo chambers and whatnot, what we were talking about before.
Cool, that's so interesting. So I think the big thing that I take away here is to use ChatGPT as a tool, but you have to understand the limitations and how it works to really get good results, or to get solid results, let's call it that. And just sort of throwing in a couple of prompts and expecting that what comes out is good or is correct would be a very simplistic way. And I think we are still all learning how to use it, as it is constantly changing as well. But I think there's sort of some qualities that we have to understand that are unique and new to this technology that we haven't seen before in anything else.
Absolutely, because you see, AI was marketed as something that's going to save you a lot of time. It's going to make your life so much easier. But then again, if you think about it, even with a Google search, you could stumble upon information that's completely untrue and that could be completely harmful. It's the same thing with ChatGPT. And one other thing most people don't consider is that, yes, it can save you a lot of time, but only if you also invest a lot of time into learning how to use it properly. There is a learning curve, just like there was with Google, If you had a strong Google foo, you knew how to filter those results and how to spot a website that's scammy or fraud or someone that's just posing as an expert.
So true. Cool. So, Adriana, thank you for the insights. I found that really, I like the finding objections idea. I've never heard of anyone who does that. And I like how you're sort of confronting, shall I say, the pink elephant in the room. You're confronting what most people don't like to think or see, because we always want to be reconfirmed with what we already believe and see. So I like your thinking behind that. So if listeners want to work with you, how can they find you, and what kind of work or what kind of clients are you looking for?
So they can find my agency at idun.pro. That's IDUNN.pro for copywriting and content writing services. And if they're looking for unbiased marketing and growth advice without the hacks and with obviously the contrarian view that you'll find in very few other places, they can subscribe to my newsletter, Ideas to Power Your Future. It's very easy to find. on adrianatica.com.
Thank you. And add you on LinkedIn. So that's how we met originally. Everybody can find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Cool. Thank you, Adriana. Hope to see you in another show in the future at some point. And it was great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Simon. It was great being here.